The following broadcast is made possible by the House of Carrion, creators of the Free State's most execrably scented perfumes. They're here, the latest Free State fragrances from the House of Carrion. It's the ultimately organic deodorant. Green, garlic and onions. The summer smell guaranteed to attract instant attention. And for the true odor of a man, there's cattle truck. It's your diesel and dung alternative to civilized scents. Ladies, add a touch of intrigue to your life with cadaver. Release your inner necrophile with its fresh formalin flavor. Now available at all reputable tractor dealers, abattoirs and liquor wholesalers. May also be ordered from the spares division of the local co-op. Greetings to everybody watching today. Today we are reviewing the English First Additional Language, Paper 1, which was written in June. This obviously is review and commentary. I am Timothy of Tapelong, which is a very small school of which I'm sure none of you have ever heard, but that doesn't matter. Today, remember, we are not merely going through the answers. There's not very much point to that. Your teachers have done that with you already, I am certain. Although answers will be addressed, they will be addressed in context of preparation for September and November. I know that most of you out there are more concerned about November than anything else. So it is for that target that we shall be aiming today. Here is the paper. I hope you can remember this. And you'll see grade 12, English First Additional Language, June 2015, marks 80, time 2 hours. Now in this part of this broadcast, my intention is to tackle the comprehension and the summary sections. The first thing that I would like to address before we go on is tips on answering comprehension tests effectively. Now, I know that most often these broadcasts are in fact watched after they have been transmitted. In other words, there is a very good chance that you are going to be watching a recording. Allowing for this, of course, I'll go through this relatively slowly, and if, as I suspect, most of you are going to see this as a recording, simply hit the pause button and take notes as you see fit. Here we have how to answer a comprehension test, and these tips are what I have taken from marking the work of my guys at my school, and also the various aspects that I have observed while marking the national papers. So believe me, this is not confined to one specific school. This is throughout the Free State that I would recommend you follow the following items of advice. Let's begin then with read the instructions. Just in case, take nothing for granted. Much more important than you think, we as markers know that very few people actually read the instructions, because as you go through the exam as a marker, you find that spaces are not left between answers, sections are not started on new pages, the basics are not really being addressed. You know, there's one thing, before we go on with the tips on this slide, although just to be nice to you, I'll pop up one more. Before we read through that, remember that your paper in November is being marked by a person who does not know whom you are. Then remember also that it is a person. People get tired. People get sore eyes. They want you to produce easy work to mark. Please remember that. Make the marker happy, and your marks, as a result, will almost certainly improve. Let's take a look at this next point that we have brought up here on the screen. Read through the text at least twice to make sure you understand it fully. This will save you time. And no, I haven't gone completely mad. If you have read the text thoroughly, you will not need to go back to the text to search where to find the answers. You will understand it. And a word of warning here is that many of the questions, especially the higher order, more difficult questions, are based on the text as a whole. There are no specifically correct answers to be found in the text. It's your opinion, it's your interpretation. But we'll come to that a bit later. Here's a third one. And I've said there, do not read only the questions before attempting to spot the answers by identifying key words in the text. This is not how comprehension tests are compiled. Comprehension means understanding. They are there to assess your full understanding of the passage. They are not there to see whether you can copy out little bits to address the answers. Please be careful about that. I do know that English is very difficult, and I do know that some people struggle to answer correctly. But I have a few tips for you in that regard also. Let's move on slightly. My fourth tip here, read the questions carefully, taking note of the instructions. And there I've given you as a common example, refer to paragraph 2. All right? If it says refer to paragraph 2, but your answer comes from paragraph 4, even though it's correct, technically, it will not be correct according to the memorandum because you have not obeyed the instructions. So please, people, obey the instructions that you are given. Now, the next one here is, in order to make sure that you understand the question fully, take time over the question. Don't quickly look at the question and quickly try to answer it. Remember that you have 2 hours in which to answer this paper. And I know that most of you are going to finish without any problems long before the 2-hour time limit has finished. Remember the signboards that you will see next to the road? Don't fool yourself. Speed kills. This applies to answering comprehension tests. Okay, now, here is a very funny fault. Oh, wasn't that brilliant alliteration? You hear that? A very funny fault. Oh, nice. Goes well in the ears. We can address that also in the poetry section later. But here, true or false, agree, disagree, etc. Do not change these to yes, no. Why people are doing that, I have no idea. But I do know that many of you lost marks in your June exams because instead of writing true or false, you wrote yes, no, or otherwise left it out completely, even though your justification was correct. That loses marks. And while we're on the subject of true, false, remember that if the question asks you true, false, agree, disagree, yes, no, whichever the question is, the marks are for the justification, not the true or false component. Now, just by the way, in your exams, always you will see, instead of the word justification, now the word substantiation is used. Don't worry. They are synonyms. The words have exactly the same meanings. All right? But remember that a true or false without a reason is unfortunately completely invalid. It's a 0 mark. Now, people, please bear with me while we spend a minute or two addressing this next one. And it says here, when you are asked to quote from the text, ensure that the quote is the correct length. I'm stressing that, the correct length. Please, I beg of you for your own sakes. And there I've given you examples of what you can possibly encounter. You can be asked to quote a sentence, possibly a clause, although that is rare. I haven't really seen that at first editional level. A phrase. Now this one, the next one, 3 consecutive words. In this exam, there is one asked for 4 consecutive words as justification for a question. Please, if it asks you for 4 consecutive words and you give 3, the answer is wrong automatically. If it asks you for 4 consecutive words and you give 5, the answer will be partially incorrect. I would still award 1 mark, but only a reduced mark in that case, because the instructions have not been followed entirely, right? Now, the next thing which I've put here, and I've underlined it, and use quotation marks. This is not absolutely critical, but it is a very good habit to develop. When I drove to Bloemfontein this morning, I drove for 150 kilometers and I was wearing my seatbelt. And would you believe I did not have a single accident along the way? In fact, I have been driving for many years indeed, and never once while I have been wearing a seatbelt have I had an accident. But that does not mean I do not need to wear the seatbelt. What that means is that I am using my common sense because I am allowing for the fact that something may go wrong. And this is the same thing with using quotation marks. You must please get into that good habit because it might make a difference one day. Please use quotation marks. Now, the next one is a very awkward one. Always answer by referring to the text. Never use your own knowledge. If, for example, I were to ask you, what is the greatest achievement of Nelson Mandela? And let's say that you answer that he reconciled the country after many years of division. You would be correct. But what happens if that answer is not in the text? Then you would be wrong because the answer has not referred to the text. Always, please people, refer to the text even though you can provide an answer from your own knowledge. If you make that mistake, you will lose marks. Here's just a quick one, which I saw frequently in the past, not so common lately, but take a look here. If you are asked to suggest a suitable title for the text, ensure that it is relevant and the correct length, usually 6 words. If, for example, you were to provide, that is a day that I will never forget in my whole life, it's wrong. Please don't ever use that. And what's more, in your essays, don't use that either. We regard that as a pre-prepared piece of text and we hate it. It's boring. We've seen it 20,000 times before. All right. So please, no more than 6 words is usually the limit for a title, and it must be relevant. If, for example, the piece of text is about Nelson Mandela, don't then please give me a title saying the beauty of South Africa. That is irrelevant. You must stick to the topic. Now, moving on here, as far as possible. Now, please note, I have qualified that with an adverbial phrase, as far as possible, because it's not always possible. Avoid copying answers directly from the text. Do you hear that? As far as possible, avoid copying answers directly from the text. And then once again, I've qualified it, unless a quote is required, of course. Obviously, if you're quoting, you must copy from the text. But if you have been instructed to fill in supply answers in your own words, please do your very best to make sure that the answers are exactly that, your own words. This is, incidentally, a comment here. This is where your knowledge of synonyms and antonyms is so important. Synonyms are words with similar meanings. Antonyms are words with opposite meanings. And in order to change the words to show clearly that you are answering in your own words, you need to be able to know how to use synonyms and antonyms. Let's move on then. No, let's not move on. I want to add another comment there. English is difficult. I don't expect you all to be masters of the English language, because I am an English home language speaker and I am not a master of the language. It's a very difficult language to get entirely correct. So when I am saying avoid copying from the text if you can, sometimes you can't. In which case, copy from the text. It's better than getting no answer at all. Leave a line open between your answers. That is not a request, it is an order. Do you see that exclamation mark at the end of that sentence? That means that the sentence contains emotion and that the sentence is an imperative, which is an order. The reason I'm saying leave a line open between your answers, firstly, it is an instruction in the comprehension test. But it is there to make the paper easier to mark. If the paper is difficult to mark, well, it's going to drop your marks. Your results will not be as good as they could be, because then the marker cannot distinguish between where one answer stops and where the next answer begins. Please, people, you've got 20 pages of script to use in your final exams. 20 pages. You cannot fill that book up by using lots of those pages. And if you do fill it up, we, the invigilators, will give you another script. Absolutely free. How's that for a special offer? Let's move on slightly. Here are a few common instruction words. You don't really need to go down this whole list. It's fairly obvious, but there, I've included this anyway. You'll see there why, what is the reason, what thing or factor is involved, when, where, who, how, list, explain, compare. That's an important one. In what ways are they different or similar? Identify, and then you'll see at the bottom I've put justify or substantiate, which means give a reason for your answer. I'd also like to bring to your attention a few books which I have brought along with me. I'm going to slip these under the document scanner. Okay, let's just see how this is going. Good. There we are. That's fine. Thank you very much. And this book is called Towards Enhancing Learner Attainment. It was specifically compiled for both English home language and first additional language. And this was done last year when they analyzed the mistakes being made on the various question papers. And this book was compiled as a result. It is brilliant, very useful. In particular, if you look at the middle pages here, it's got the most wonderful information about body language as used in visual literacy, especially the cartoons. You'll see that rubbing eyes and part of the body, the eyes, and possible meaning, disbelief, upset, or tiredness. Really a great book. If your teachers have not yet supplied you with this book, go to them and ask them to do so. I do know that the last I checked, there were still copies available in the department. They are given out freely to all schools who request them. Then, a new book which I have just received in the past few weeks is called Support Material for Progressed Learners. Now, I've been using this one in my own classroom, and believe me, it's not just the progressed guys that are being advantaged by this. Every single one of my grade 12s, when they saw this book, said, give me a copy. We want it. It's excellent. Once again, it has analyzed the person who wrote this. There we are. There's the author's name. The person who wrote this analyzed the faults in the various papers, and they have addressed those faults in this book. It's full of visual literacy, it's corrections of grammar errors, really useful. To the teachers out there, I say, if you have not yet got your hands on this, get it. It will benefit your children, your students will benefit greatly from this book. The third one, which I always advocate the purchase of, that was tangled English there. This one is the English Handbook and Study Guide by Lutrin and Pincus. There you will see the authors' names at the bottom there. It's a great book. To date, I have not yet encountered a more useful grammar book in the classroom. It's not only about grammar, you've got visual literacy in here, you've got how to study poetry, everything. You've got parts of speech. Everything that you want is in here. Please, if you don't yet have a copy, buy one. They are not expensive. The last I checked, they were being sold for about 210 rands each. But considering that it's the last grammar book that you will ever buy in your life, it's money very well spent. Let us return now to our comprehension section. I must keep my eye on the clock, of course. We don't have the whole day, although I do wish we did have. Here we have the instructions and information page that I have taken directly from this exam. You will see here, the question paper consists of 3 sections, Section A, Comprehension, Section B, Summary, Section C, Language. Answer all the questions, read all the instructions carefully, start each section on a new page. Now, from number 4, we know very well that you haven't read this because you didn't start the section on a new page. Clever, aren't we? Good. Now, number 5, leave a line between the answers, please. Thank you. Number the answers correctly according to the numbering system used in this question paper. Believe it or not, I still get from my own guys who I've been teaching for many years now, I still get badly numbered answers. Pay special attention to spelling and sentence construction. Well, do the best you can. Yes, I know English is difficult. I know everybody's standing there going, how are we supposed to do that? All you do is the best. We're not expecting perfection. We merely want a good effort made. Time frames as a guideline. Yes, what I will say, do, and I'm using here the emphatic auxiliary verb. I will say this. Emphasis, you hear that? Don't get up and leave the exam hall until you have worked your way through the exam patiently and thoroughly. And finally, number 9, write neatly and legibly, to which I would like to add the following. Use, please, a medium point pen, okay? Fine point pens don't write as clearly as medium point pens. Please make sure that you use a medium point pen. They're not that expensive, and If the worst comes to the worst, go to your teacher and ask the school to provide you with a medium point pen, preferably a blue one. A black one is still permitted, but a blue one is the best. We like to mark blue medium point answers. Thank you for your patience. Allow me to return these to my needlessly overstuffed pocket full of pens. I really like doing this to people. This is my badge of rank showing that I am a teacher. Good. Now, people, let's move on slightly. We come to section 1, our comprehension. Now, the first thing I have instructed you to do is to check the instructions. So, what are the instructions? In this case, nothing unusual, but it did no harm to check. Now, I know that you have read this section of text already. For this reason, I'm not going to read it through with you. All I shall say is it talks about, during the course of this text, these people that smuggle cameras, cell phones actually, into movie houses and record the movies. I have seen that done. I have seen a copy of the movie Kingsman, The Secret Service, which was obviously copied using a cell phone camera, because on occasions you can actually hear the cell phone ringing. So we've all seen the text. Let us then jump directly to the question.